Hey everybody, I'm back again. This time I am introducing the unit on genre analysis. So we are going to be focusing a bit on expanding your understanding and your definition of genre. I'm sure you're used to genre. Uh, and usually we talk about literary genres, right? Fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, so on and so forth, and all those subcategories. That's usually the first thing that people think of when we talk about genre, but of course, that also applies to music, right? We have different genres of music and film and art and so on and so forth. So you can think of genre more as a way of kind of categorizing a certain artifact, right? But genres really are developed as kind of, and Wardle and Downs iterate this in their book Writing About Writing, that genres develop as repeated responses to recurring rhetorical situations. So if you remember from your English 1001 or your Comp 1 classes, the rhetorical situation involves things like the writer or the speaker or the reader, the audience, the purpose, context, all of those things that come together during a writing or a speaking situation. So we develop genres, right, when there are these repeated responses. So we have like the genre of the academic essay, and an academic essay or an academic article looks very different. It appears very different. Its structure, its format is very different than what you would read in a very popular magazine, for example. And a blog post would be different than an opinion, an op-ed article in a newspaper. So if you can start to expand the definition of genre, this will help you a lot as we move forward in this genre analysis unit. So genres, you also want to think, they give writers and readers alike a sense of expectations in the text, right? If you know what the genre is, you have certain expectations. So you know that a textbook, for example, is probably not going to have lots of photos in it or lots of images in it. If it's primarily a textbook about writing, right? It's not going to be image heavy. It's probably going to be very text heavy. So you have certain expectations within a particular genre, a particular format. But I also want you to think about the idea that genres are not rigid formulas. They change over time and across different contexts as writers and readers' purposes shift. So, what can I think of as an example? Well, poetry, for example, right? Poetry, once upon a time, was very formulaic. It was, you had a certain number of lines, and you had a certain type of rhyming pattern, certain type of scheme. And while we still have that in the world of poetry, poetry has changed dramatically since the time of Shakespeare or even before Shakespeare, right? It's more free form. It may not be as dependent on rhyme, right? We're more about the imagery, or we're more about the emotion that's being conveyed rather than sticking to a strict formula. Of course, you can do both, right? The very, very good poets can incorporate form and that to certain expectations of rhyme and rhythm and meter and all of that stuff, and still have a very emotional poem, right? And still have wonderful imagery. So that could be an example of where different contexts and different writers and readers' purposes shift, right? The purposes shift across time. And of course, in our digital age, things are always seem to be fluid. So if you can at least wrap your mind around expanding the notion of what genre is, that it's repeated responses to recurring rhetorical situations. It gives us a sense of expectations of a text, and genres are not rigid formulas. They can change over time according to various purposes. So let me share my screen here and get you into the Unit 2 overview page. Here we go. And just like that Unit 1 overview, it gives you a brief overview of what we're trying to do with the genre analysis unit. Keep in mind it will culminate again in a 5 to 6 page genre analysis paper. Week 4, as I said in the Unit 1 overview, this is kind of a bridge week. We have our feet in both worlds, right? We're finishing up the literacy narrative, but we're also getting a head start in the introduction to genre. And then we go through essentially the whole month of June, we'll be focusing on genre. The course learning outcomes, by the end of this unit, you'll be able to fulfill the first learning outcome, analyze how multiple discourse communities make, communicate, and debate meaning through various genres and writing practices. Of course, produce various genres that reflect knowledge of the writing practices, purposes, yada, yada, yada. So the first, the third, and the fourth. Of course, the fourth one is always having to do with drafting and revising. So with all of the assignments, all of the longer writing assignments, the major essays, you, of course, are going to be taking care of that course objective number 4. And once again, down at the bottom, we have the checklist. Fewer discussion and short writes. We only have one discussion and one short write. The short write is just getting together a couple of samples for your chosen genre. And that will be more of a compare and contrast type of thing. And then we have the rough draft due on Sunday, the 22nd, with a peer review. Quick turnaround for peer review, Wednesday the 25th. So that's one of those midweek things, similar to how we do discussions with your responses. Wednesday is always the due date for those peer responses or peer reviews. And then the final genre analysis revision due Sunday the 29th. So that gives you a heads up for what to expect in Unit 2. And of course, each of these links link to either the overview page in the weekly breakdown or to the assignments that you are expected to do in the unit. So that is that. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.